Welcome to She's Got This, the podcast for ambitious women who want to grow and scale their business and use the power of intentional energy direction to design their very best life. I'm your host, Christine Gallagher, award-winning business coach and mindset mentor to female entrepreneurs. If you're ready to own your brilliance while making bank, step into the absolute best version of you, and become a force for positive change in the world, you're in the right place. Let's do it. Hi, it's Christine Gallagher. Welcome to the show. If you're new, I'm so glad you're here to check out She's Got This. If you're returning to the podcast, welcome back. I have a really fun topic for us to talk about today, and it's nervous system regulation, which sounds kind of weird if you're thinking like, that sounds scientific and not like something you would talk about on a business and mindset podcast, but it actually ties in a lot and is really appropriate to talk about for entrepreneurs. And we're going to talk about why. So one of the cool things that has happened over recent years is that things are starting to shift where people are starting to see the connection between the mind and the body. And what I also noticed in the past few years is I started hearing other entrepreneurs and people in social media, colleagues, connections, starting to talk about regulation of the nervous system. And it kind of seemed like it came out of nowhere. But again, I think it aligns with this shift that has been happening generally. Now, I've been pretty interested in the topic for several years myself because of learning about trauma and how it actually lives in the body. If you have read the book, The Body Keeps the Score, you know what I'm talking about. And if you haven't, you might want to check that out because it talks about that difference between thinking that everything is in the mind and instead looking at how things like trauma actually live in our body and how somatic experiencing is one of the ways that a lot of people are getting into their body to relieve themselves of symptoms from trauma. So it all kind of goes together. So in a nutshell, what do we actually mean by nervous system regulation? So what that means is that our nervous system can go into a very high state of arousal. And this is where regulation needs to happen, because if we're in a very high state of arousal, you can think about fight or flight, then we need to actually calm it down, because when we're in a state of fight or flight, it's not comfortable. We start to panic. It can create anxiety and a whole bunch of really uncomfortable symptoms. So not to get too sciencey, but when our nervous system is in a state of being dysregulated, what's really happening is the nervous systems, right? The parasympathetic nervous system and the sympathetic nervous system are out of balance. They're out of whack. And it really makes us feel stressed. It makes us feel like we're at our edge. And it can also affect us in areas of problem solving, being able to make good decisions, being able to connect with other people. There can be all kinds of cascading things that happen. Some people get chronic pain. Some people get nausea. Some people might not be able to sleep. It affects our mood. We can have difficulty concentrating. We can have things like migraines or other chronic pain, or just being really agitated. The really helpful thing is we can now recognize the dysregulation in our system. Once we have the awareness that this is actually a thing, we can recognize it and then have a response to it in a way that protects us and helps us to stay healthy and at our best. So if somebody is in a space where they're feeling really stressed out, or they're even in a situation which is dangerous, what happens is the sympathetic nervous system acts as a protector. And it tries to protect us because it sends signals that activate certain processes in the body. And again, it increases that arousal and it makes us more alert, right? It's saying danger, warning, something is happening. And then the parasympathetic nervous system also carries signals. But what it does is uses those signals to deactivate the processes once the stress has passed or you are out of that dangerous situation. And then you go back to this baseline of calmness. So again, the dysregulation happens when the two systems, are not working at their best levels in response to whatever is going on with us in our life at that moment. So I wanted to talk about why this is particularly of concern for entrepreneurs or anybody who needs to function at a high level, who might encounter stress, who is trying to create an environment where they're doing, again, their best work. This is important because we can get dysregulated and it can stop us from doing things. And again, there are many different reasons why this topic is important to business owners and beyond. But if you think about a simple example, if you are wondering, okay, should I do this video to share with my audience about this new thing I've learned because I want to teach them something, right? And if you're afraid of getting on video, or you have all sorts of reactions that happen in your body because you become nervous or you become worried, what will people think? Or am I going to mess up? Or how many takes is this video going to have to take for me to get it done? Then you're starting to see those responses in your body, which can create an environment where you want to shut down. You can become really anxious. You can shut yourself down and you can decide, I'm not doing this video, which again, hurts you, right, as the business owner trying to get this information out that would help your people. But again, if you think about it, it can also hurt your audience because they're not getting this great information that you could share because you are in a place of dysregulation. So that's just one simple example, but you can think about this in any occasion as a business owner before you're going to get on stage to do a talk, before you are hitting send on an email that is going to start your launch, right? Anything you can think of can create that stress response in us. And because I talk a lot about creating your reality and manifestation with my clients and on this podcast, I also have to mention how this comes into play here. So when you're in this state of dysregulation, obviously you're not feeling your best, you're not doing your best, and it can be really stressful, which can affect how you see yourself and how you feel about yourself. So if you've listened to other episodes of mine or followed me at all, you've probably heard me talk about self-concept and how important it is to being a successful entrepreneur and being successful at creating what it is that you want, right? So self-concept comes into play because if we are continually being in a place of dysregulation and it's getting in our way, we can start to think about ourselves some not so great things like, oh, I always mess up. Why does this always happen to me? I'm so annoyed with my anxiety. I can't do anything right, et cetera, et cetera. And it becomes like this downward spiral. So it not only affects us physiologically and mentally, it affects how we see ourselves and our concept of ourselves. And if you know anything about self-concept, it's everything, because your concept of yourself relates to obviously how you see yourself and feel about yourself, but also how other people see you and relate to you as well. So also lately, coinciding with this increased conversation around dysregulation and how it can affect entrepreneurs, I've been watching a lot of YouTube, and another episode of mine, I talked about some of the YouTubers I have been watching, and one of them is Dylan James. He talks about manifestation, but he talks a lot about self-concept. And I've actually learned a bunch from him about nervous system regulation and what actually helps to do that. So if that's somebody you haven't checked out on YouTube, you might want to check him out. He talks a lot about relationships, but I find that his stuff applies across the board, whether it's business, whether it's life, whether it is relationships that are with a significant other or with clients, anybody really. And so he talks a lot about the ways that he combats the dysregulation on his channel. But I wanted to just give you some quick ideas for how you can introduce nervous system regulation into your everyday and not make it feel like, oh my gosh, it's another thing I have to worry about, or it's another thing that I have to do. You don't want to think about it that way. You want to think about it in terms of, you know what? There are some processes that are happening in my body that I can't always control, or that I can't always understand. And it just gives you a lot of clarity, and it gives you a lot of power to know that there are things that you can do to intervene when these things are happening. So it's not as out of control as you might initially think. So the first thing that you can do for regulation is breath work. So you may have heard of Wim Hof. Wimhof. He is a guy who's gotten really popular in recent years for his breathwork practices. He has an app. He's all over YouTube. He is one person that you can look into to get a snapshot of what breathwork is about. And of course, there are lots of other resources out there, but essentially, what breathwork does is it shifts the state that you're in. It shifts where you are. And because our nervous system is what controls our breathing, we can be more aware of it to really help regulate that parasympathetic response. So there are different types of breath work, but one of the more popular ones that I myself have used is called box breathing. And so it's pretty simple. What you do for box breathing is you inhale for 4 counts, then you hold the breath for 4 counts, then you exhale for 4 counts, and then you hold the breath for 4 counts and you repeat. Another way to practice breath work is alternate nostril breathing. And this actually comes from yoga. And the way it works is you just get yourself comfortable. You can sit in a chair or some comfortable position on the floor. You can cross your legs if you'd like. And they suggest that you do it by placing your left hand on your left knee and then lifting your right hand up towards your nose. You then exhale completely and you use your right thumb to close your right nostril. And then what you do is you inhale through your left nostril and then close your left nostril with your fingers. Then you open your right nostril and exhale through that side. Then you inhale through your right nostril and then close that nostril. And then you open your left nostril and exhale through the left side. And that's one cycle. And then you can continue doing that for up to 5 minutes. And they always say to complete the practice by finishing with an exhale on the left side. So you can do these types of breath work anytime you are feeling like you need to focus or you need to relax or you need to chill out. And you just want to make sure you don't do, for example, the alternate nostril breathing if you feel sick or congested, because that might get a little bit not fun. But this is something, again, that you can just pull out and do anytime, anywhere when you're feeling like you really need to get yourself regulated. Another great method for regulation is EFT tapping. EFT stands for Emotional Freedom Technique. And just as a side note, a little anecdote about when I first found out about this, it was way back in like 2008, and I'll never forget. I was still in a job I couldn't stand, wanted to be an entrepreneur, but was like afraid to take the leap. I hired this business coach named Tom, and he knew that I was being dysregulated pretty frequently because I was just so stressed about my situation and wanting to move on to bigger and better things. And so he taught me about EFT, and it was really impactful for me. And Brad Yates is somebody that he pointed me to on YouTube, and Brad Yates, 15 years later, is still over there on YouTube. So I really suggest that you check him out if you want to get started with EFT. But essentially what it is tapping on the 12 meridian points in your body so that you can relieve symptoms that come with negative experiences or emotions. So again, if you are dysregulated. So you can think of it as kind of being similar to acupuncture. And it really helps to restore the energy in your body. It restores it to a place of balance. And so the idea is when you restore this energy, it can relieve those symptoms that are happening that are negative. So where acupuncture uses needles to put that pressure on your energy points, EFT uses your fingertips to tap and apply pressure. And another time that EFT really helped me out that I remember was when I was considering leaving my marriage, actually. And one of my biz girlfriends recommended me a woman named Annie who did virtual EFT tapping over Zoom, or I think at that time it was Skype. But basically, I had a bunch of sessions with her, and it was really helpful to get me over that hump of being afraid, even though I knew the best situation at that time was to leave my marriage, but it was really, really scary. So really briefly, how it works, and again, you can go on YouTube and get a lot more information. And also, if you're very visual like me, you'll see how this actually looks and what it looks like when you're doing it to yourself. But what you start with is identifying a particular issue that you're going through. So a fear or an issue that you have currently, and that becomes what you focus on while you're tapping. And the idea is to focus on one thing at a time. So you identify what it is you're dealing with, and then you test what the intensity is. So essentially, that's just numbers, right? On a scale of 0 to 10, 10 being the worst or most difficult. And that acts as a benchmark to show you how you are progressing as you do the tapping. Then after that, you do a setup. And essentially, in a setup, you come up with a phrase that explains what you're trying to address. So you're using a phrase that acknowledges the issue you're having, and the idea is that you're accepting yourself despite what you're going through. So a common phrase here would be, even though I have this fear of X, right? I deeply and completely love and accept myself. And then you go through the sequence for tapping. So again, there are 12 major meridians that are mirrored on each side of your body, and they correspond to an organ. And so EFT usually focuses on areas like the side of your hand, the top of your head, your eyebrow, the side of your eye, under your nose, your chin, the beginning of your collarbone, and under your arm. And what you do is you start by tapping those points while you're also at the same time saying your setup phrase 3 times. And then you're tapping each of the points about 7 times, and you move down the body in ascending order. And then finally, you test the intensity. Again, you come up with the number. And if you're doing it correctly, then the number should be going down in intensity. Another way to regulate your nervous system is, of course, meditation. And I'm sure we've all heard about meditation. And it's interesting, when I talk to people, they're usually in one of 2 places. They're like, I've tried meditation and I couldn't do it. I feel like I'm just bad at it. Or they're saying, I do meditation all the time and it's completely changed my life, right? Or somewhere in between there. I used to think I could not do meditation. I thought that my mind was full of too many thoughts. I couldn't calm myself down. I had a misunderstanding of what it was, because I thought it meant you had to have your head completely empty of thoughts for like a sustained amount of time. And I felt like that was impossible, right? So there's a lot of myths and misunderstanding around meditation. But for me, what actually got me to start doing meditation about 8 years ago now was I used a free app. And there are lots of apps out there now for meditation. Insight Timer is one of my favorite, and it's got a ton of free meditations on there. Whether you want to meditate with somebody who's actually speaking, right? So a guided meditation, or you could do one that is just like chimes. I personally like the ones that have a mantra. So when I first started doing meditation with an app, it was a chant of rum, rum, rum over and over. And what that does is it helps you to focus on that versus worrying so much about, oh my gosh, I'm thinking, or oh, my mind is wandering. And the thing about meditation is it's totally okay if your mind wanders. Just want to give it a try, and don't try to start by saying, I'm going to meditate 30 minutes a day, twice a day. You can work your way up there. But I really started by doing like 5 minutes a day in the morning. And I think I ended up getting up to 20 minutes a day. And then sometimes when I was really dealing with a lot of things, I would do it twice a day. But it's totally up to you. Of course, there's lots of instructional videos on YouTube. One of the types of meditation you can look into that's very popular is transcendental meditation. But the idea is that you're giving yourself time and space away from all of the thoughts that are racing through our head all of the time. As humans, we're constantly trying to focus on this, that, and the other thing. A lot of us are multitaskers, and it's really hard to get ourselves to find time to just breathe and be. And that is the purpose of meditation. So of course, this helps to regulate your breath and regulate your nervous system. And that's why it's an important part of this conversation. And so I went into detail about a few of my favorite ways to create more regulation and balance in your body, but there are lots of other ways too. First of all, getting enough sleep is also a way to keep yourself in balance. Doing movement, so whether that's working out, walking, jogging, dancing, doing things like yoga or Tai Chi, even for some people, chanting and singing is a great way to get back in balance. Grounding yourself in nature, walking barefoot, whether that's on the grass or at the beach. Recently, I went to one of my favorite spots nearby, which is a really tiny lake near where I live. And I pulled out my journal and took off my flip-flops and just grounded myself in the grass because that's what I needed at that time. And I'm always amazed at how much that actually works. Other ways are massage. And you can go down the rabbit hole of looking up things like somatic experiencing, which is something I mentioned earlier in this episode, vagus nerve exercises, abandonment work. So there really is no lack of techniques or processes where you can get a hold of your regulation and really get yourself back into a place where you're feeling more at ease and not letting yourself spiral. Because again, that's what would happen to me. And again, it happens to me still, but I have tools in the toolbox. And that's why I wanted to share these with you. But it's really hard when you go into a place of spiraling to feel confident about yourself, about your business, about the marketing, about doing what you have to do, about being visible, about being seen. But I want you to know you're not alone if you go into this place of feeling really out of whack, and you don't have to deal with it on your own trying to figure it out. There are lots of ways that are free and that are simple that you can offer yourself and really give that gift to yourself so that you're feeling better and you're getting into that better space. So I hope this was helpful for you and that you feel that you have more tools now to work on yourself and really put yourself at the biggest advantage for what you're looking to achieve and do in this world. Thanks so much for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, I would love it if you could leave me a review on iTunes or share it with someone else who would find it helpful. To stay connected with me, please visit shesgotclients.com and sign up for my email list at the bottom of the page. Or feel free to share this episode on your Instagram and tag me at Christine G and I'll repost you. I would love to share this with as many people as possible. I love you. Until next time, keep shining your light.